What was your I'm officially old moment? Story 1. When I fell down the last couple of steps on a stairway, no one pointed and laughed like I expected. Instead, they helped me up and asked me if I was okay. That's when I knew. Reply 1. Damn. That has to be a bummer. You fall, you know you're fine, you feel like an idiot. You get ready to wave to the crowd as they laugh and clap. But then, a hand is placed on your arm and you hear, "That was a big fall, are you okay?" You stay in shock for a moment. Of course you're fine, everyone is looking at you. They all have concerned faces. Crap. 2 weeks later, the soreness finally subsides. Reply 2. Oh yeah. I mean, I feel young enough that I was embarrassed as hell, but not hurt. Everyone is running to help me like I was a 90-year-old, fragile old man. I reply, both my spouse and my roomie treat me like I'm made out of glass. Yeah, I've been injured before. Severely in some cases. Yeah, they've been accidentally self-inflicted a time or two, but you know what? I can still climb a freaking ladder and clean the goddamn gutters. Stop acting like I'm trying to commit suicide. Reply 4. This happened to me as well. Walking my dog the day after a huge snowstorm. There were some rowdy teenage boys having a snowball fight across the street. Schools were closed that day, of course. I slipped on the ice, my feet flew over my head, and I landed solidly on my backside. As I struggled to get up, I braced myself for the laughter and catcalls, but all I heard was, "Are you okay, ma'am? Do you need help?" I was in my early 50s and had never felt old until that moment. Reply 5. Bless your heart. I woke up blind 16 months ago, and while I'm only 40, a fall gets a much bigger reaction from my husband and kids now than when I was sighted. Oh God, especially when I fell one day in the shower. I had to yell at my boys not to come in because I didn't want them to see me naked. But I was wrapped in the stupid shower curtain, shower still spraying water, and I'd cracked my head on the faucet. To say I was disoriented was an understatement. I finally managed to get out of the curtain and grab a towel to cover myself. Then I let the boys come in to check my head and get the floor dry so I could try to stand. Falling sucks. Reply 6. Honestly, that might have more to do with younger peeps just not doing that as much. I'm a Gen Z. I don't laugh when people fall, bar the occasional IRL slapstick fall, because regardless of age, it's dangerous. I wear big boots a lot and have tripped loads around friends. They all just help write me and ask if I'm okay. Even my older sister, Gen Z, doesn't always laugh. Might just not be a thing so much now. Although, I've got no idea what the school-age kids in Gen Z are like, I'm sure keeping a distance from them. Story 2. I'm a preschool teacher. It's been a trip to watch parents go from so much older than me to the same age as me, and now they're younger than me. Reply 1. See, that's what really kinda drives it home for me. I'm not bothered that I'm 48, but that means my school friends are 48. And that's weird for some reason. Like, I went to school with a guy who was wild and crazy. That guy is 48 now and has a new grandbaby. Somehow he's old and I'm just getting up there. Reply 2. As a 40-something copywriter, I volunteered in a high school writing center and realized I've been a professional writer longer than the teacher had been alive. Also, teachers today don't dress like teachers. I thought she was a student until she stood up and ordered the kids around. L's, the anti-bullying and LGBT acceptance posters. When I was in high school, bullying was practically part of the curriculum. Reply 3. I had a similar thing through grad school. I started teaching at the beginning of my master's program, so I was like 22, 23. So most of my students were basically 3-ish years younger than me, plus I usually taught nights, which had a lot of postdoc/returning students who reached from older than me to substantially older than me. My first class, I had a woman who was like 63, who said she had a grandson about my age. Over the years, that turned into me being the same age as the postdocs. By the time I finished my PhD, I was usually the oldest person in the room by a large margin, with a few exceptions who were close to my age. It was a weird feeling like, we're the same age to geez you are literal children. Reply 4. This must be so weird. Everyone felt so old when we were in kindergarten/preschool. Honestly, it's so scary to me that the people my age are the people having kids and working their way up to positions of power. I don't feel qualified to be an adult, so it's creepy to imagine other people my age with major responsibilities like children. Maybe even weirder, because in all of the shows we watched as kids, parents seemed like they were much older too. Parent-teacher conferences on TV were always attended by mom and dad actors in their 30s and 40s, so maybe that plays into it. Reply 5. The first day of school for my daughter, I saw the kid of someone I graduated high school with, and her daughter who was also starting school. To know that I'm grandma age, compared to some of the other parents sent me on a bit of a spiral. Like, I knew I was older than most first-time parents, but I didn't realize I was that old. And when I told the teacher that if my kid gets in trouble at school, she's in trouble at home and I support her decisions, the look on her face made me feel like the floor was going to fall out from under me at any moment. LOL. I didn't realize how unusual that is these days. Why in the world would a parent go against what the teacher says? There are definitely circumstances where one would disagree with a teacher, but I still go by the standard that the teacher knows more than I do. Now that we've hit second grade, I don't question it anymore. I still tell the teacher so they know I'm in their corner, but I'm more amused by their reaction than shocked. Story 3. My childhood cat lived to 21 and a half, so teaching, freshman biology lab, so students were 18, became very weird when I realized my cat was older than my students. Reply 1. I had one of those history of you things you're supposed to do with students, and at one point in a room full of seniors, I said, "Does anyone remember the 2008 recession?" One student raised her hand and noted she was barely not a toddler at the time, but it was the only time her dad had ever been fired, and she just remembered being really scared because her parents were worried all the time. That was the moment the arthritis really set in. Reply 2. I was on campus last week, which was grad student orientation and undergrad move-in week. I saw a bunch of kids playing frisbee across one of the lawns and thought, OMG, the frosh really look like middle schoolers. I'm getting so old. When I got across the lawns, I saw that in fact they were middle schoolers. Day camps were a bonus week for the one school board that goes back later than the others. So now I just feel old for not being able to distinguish age for anyone post-puberty onset and under 30. Reply 3. I had a realization one day in the middle of class that my high school music students were all born after 2000. They weren't even born in the same millennium as I was. I must have had some fun expressions because one of the flutes in the front row had to ask if I was okay. Then, of course, I put my game face back on and finished the class. I had a little sit down in my office after that class period and pondered mortality. Story 4. They were complaining how hard and awkward it is to meet women on Tinder. I asked if they ever had to call a girl at home and her dad answered the phone. They were horrified. Another time, one of my guys asked what a payphone was. We worked at a phone company. Reply 1. A new young male coworker recently asked what app I met my husband on. I met him at a summer camp like 15 years ago. He then lamented about how hard it is to find a girl to date as he scrolled through profiles. I also once overheard a coworker talking about how he can't stand when people are 35 and trying to keep up with fashion and style. Like you're old, just get some jeans, a polo, and New Balances. I was 34, so that was frightening. Reply 2. Bless. I remember telling a group of young people that I used to fly planes when I was their age. They said, okay, prove it. Where are all the videos? Because one of them knew someone who is a LEOL, now banned from flying, teenager who has a pilot's license who must upload 30 videos a day of them flying. I try to say that I stopped back in 2008 and they said, yeah, but phones still had cameras on them. Aw, bless you, child. You really never have seen footage from 2006 VGA camera, have you? A plane in the sky wouldn't even register as a single pixel in its 10 FPS glory. Reply 3. When my middle son was going to his senior prom, we gave him the task of calling up tuck shops to make sure they had the style his GF had picked out. Guys are simply accessories to the girls at proms, evidently. He came back to me to let me know the one shop had what he needed, but he didn't think the other was open. I asked him why. He said that when the phone answered, it made some odd tonal noise. I said, that's a fax machine. What's a fax machine? It's how we send out documents and communications back in the day over a phone line. He looked at me blankly and said, why didn't you just send an email? This was 12 years ago. Reply 4. I'm 32 and was talking to a coworker that is like 23. He was complaining about how hard it is to meet girls now. His complaint was that girls have too many options now with all the dating sites, and it's tough to be the best one. My response was just to meet someone in real life and be genuine. This entire conversation happened at a bar. Last I heard, he is hooking up with, but not actually dating, a different friend of mine that is also in her 20s. But he doesn't want to be dating because she's a little bigger. He doesn't understand that it's difficult for him to get a girlfriend because he's a douche, not because women have more options now. Story 5. They started calling me Mom or Mama Bear on the walkie-talkies. I find it kind of endearing, actually. Reply 1. Went off to school as a non-traditional student and was required to live in the freshman dorm. Being 25-ish on a floor of 17 and 18-year-olds was a bit odd. I had spent a bit of time traveling the world, working different odd jobs, just gaining life experience, and these kids were in middle school just a few years before. Ended up being everyone's de facto big brother/uncle. My now wife's roommates called us Mom and Dad because we had our crap together and made sure everyone had a nice home-cooked meal while we doled out life advice. Our little family still keeps in touch. Reply 2. I have a game group which used to be me and some friends older than me. But then they left the game because of real-life responsibilities and I became the guild leader by default. New members joined in throughout the years and they started calling me Mama Sai once they found out how old I am. I've transitioned from the baby of the group to the team mom, and the change was a shock. Endearing, but a shock the first time. Well, now every time we do offline meets for lunch or something, I feel responsible for their safety and take care not to be seen as that one creeper adult in a group of teens. Reply 3. When I was pregnant with my son, all the younger girls started calling me Little Mama, even though I was only 28. I got so annoyed because not one of them asked me if it was okay, and I was really struggling with everyone only making my identity after I got pregnant as a mom. I get that it's endearing to some, but I didn't want to be known as just a mom after I got pregnant. Every time they called me that, I always told them, I'm not your mom and that's not my name. It actually took this specific group of girls weeks to figure out my real name when I started working there because they only wanted to call me Mama. I was this way when I was a teen too. My mom's friends would always say I could call them Mom if I wanted because their daughter's friends did it. They got high-key offended when I didn't, and my reasoning always was, you're not my mom. It's a title that belongs to the woman who raised me and put in the work to help make me the person I am. I get for other people it's fine, but to me, Mom Mama is a special title, and only my mom gets that, and only my kids get to call me that. Story 6. In trade school, we were doing introductions, saying a little bit about ourselves. One kid says, yeah, I'm really into classic cars. I have a 1997 something or another. Me, the other couple older folks, and the instructors all made audible groans of horror. Reply 1. Classic cars stopped being classic after the late 1970s for American-made, and anything after 1993 for imports. Source. Used to work for a major auto manufacturer, and we considered the last great import classic to be the 1992 Acura Integra GSR. 1970s-wise Chevy really had some muscle early on. 1980, the 5.0 Mustang GT is still pretty good, but body-wise, it's not a classic compared to the 60s and early 70s. Reply 2. My friend had an intern present in a design meeting talking excitedly about how such and such vehicle was his favorite Matchbox car when he was little. Didn't know why people were trying to hide smiles for a few minutes, and then they were like, design executive was the lead designer on that program. We thought it really wasn't quite that long ago, until now. Story 7. When they say, you look great for your age, like dead reply 1, I can't believe you're 30. You don't look that old. My friend, what do you think happens at 30? You magically wake up as a raisin? I look exactly like any other 30-year-old I know. You just have a weird idea of what 30 looks like. Reply 2. Back when I was a teenager, I thought 30 was super old too. Like the high school freshmen who look up to the seniors as adults. And then you graduate and go to college and think, man, those high school seniors are like kids. Then you graduate college and think the same thing about people in college. I think 30 is just the age you reach when there's officially a generational gap between you and the teens, early 20s. I'm in my early 30s, and the kids graduating high school didn't grow up burning CDs or with VHS tapes. And I, in turn, have seen like one TikTok video. Reply 3. 30 also differs completely for everyone. I'm 33 and still get mistaken for being in my mid-20s. Full head of hair. I'm also chronically online and on social media while working with mostly people younger than me, so I'm at least aware of most modern trends/slangs, even if it's against my will. No kids, and I still regularly go to concerts, music festivals as a hobby. Meanwhile, my former best friend from high school, who I reunited with a few months back, is starting to go bald, get gray hairs, about to have his third kid, and works as an insurance adjuster as one of the youngest people in his office. And the most recent meme he'd probably recognize is Gangnam Style. Reply 4. I'm 35 and get mistaken as a teenager still sometimes, and max age people guess is 24. Average age people assume is 18, 21. I still use slang and love pop culture. It's not that old and I'm not dead. I think half millennials are like this and we've changed the aging culture. Children also age you heavy. Never had any, never will. Reply 5. I turned 30 this year. The amount of people that met me this year and are shocked just keeps adding up. The other day at work, a coworker I hadn't met yet, and I was talking, and he said, "Holy crap, I thought you were my age, 20 inches. How badly do people take care of themselves that at my age, they look older than they are? Or is it, how do people have such a poor idea about aging? I don't hit 30 and just get lines all over my face." Story 8. I'm in and coworker needed to borrow a serial cable. The cable was older than the coworker. Reply 1. I had to buy serial cable, maybe 7 years ago when Radio Shack was still around. I walked in and told the woman working that I'm looking for a serial cable. She said, "Oh, we've got those. How long do you need?" And took me over to the USB cables. I said, "No, like an actual serial cable, not USB." She said, "What the hell do you still need one of those for? I ain't sold one in a decade. Do you need DB9 or DB15? And took me straight to where they still had DB9 serial cables taking up floor space. Reply 2. I once had to support a customer using the Versa module Eurocard bus. It's technically newer than most serial protocols, but it's aged so poorly in comparison. Like, let me just slot a pizza box into my machine so I can measure a single sensor's 0.5V output at a couple hundred H's. Meanwhile, a DB9 cable is like an old Toyota. A little long in the tooth, but still gets the job done. Reply 3. We use LAN fax at work. Fax to email for the non-IT folks. I've known how to install this in my sleep for years at my job. I've used fax machines before, albeit rarely. I can remember my dad faxing his resume for job advertisements for years. This new kid, university co-op student, got a call to install it. Gave him the instructions and his comment was, "I had no idea we still use this old technology. I've never had to use a fax before." It was a good thing I was working from home or others would have seen me cry. Story 9. I was talking to a coworker about movies and our favorites. I said something like, "I watched that movie so much when I had it on tape in my college years." Her. Tape? Me. You know, on VCR? Her. VCR? Me. Oh well, I guess those are old now. Everything is on DVD now. Her. DVD? Me. I guess those are old too. I guess Blu-ray is what's on disc now. Her. Disc? Me. Never mind, she was half joking, but nonetheless it made me feel old. Reply 1. I offered someone $1 DVDs to college kids, and they said they had nothing to watch it on. I was like, "You can watch it on your laptop." They were like, "Oh no, we can't," because they don't have disk drives anymore. Reply 2. Discs are a legacy format now that are mostly reserved for video game consoles. It's common to have one external disk drive that is used with all of the laptops, desktops, televisions. Reply 3. The Xbox once started selling digital-only consoles, and now the Series S is also digital-only. Upgrading to the Series X gets you a disk drive. The PS5 also comes in digital-only or with a disk drive, and now they're flirting with switching to a modular setup, so they only sell the digital version. But there's a slot to have a disk drive installed. Bought separately, of course, but the total cost is equal to if you had bought the previous integrated disk drive version. Discs are even legacy on game consoles now. Reply 4. My sister-in-law is what? 21 now? Had this conversation with her, and she absolutely did not know what a VCR is. She knew about DVDs though, because we used to go thrift store shopping together and I would buy them sometimes. They didn't have a gaming console or DVD player, and laptops generally don't come with a disk drive anymore, so she wouldn't have a way to play a DVD anyway. Everything is digital now. Story 10 had an intern refer to the 90s as the late 1900s, WTF. It's true, but it makes my teenage years sound like the Oregon Trail or something. Reply 1. I do this too, but I do it like I'm the old guy giving a history lesson. Back in the past, before the towers fell, AOL would mail us a free coaster every month. We had to call the internet on the phone, but the phone was connected to the wall in your house. There were no cell phones, but we had pagers. Only doctors needed them. Reply 2. My kids will be like back in the olden days when you were a kid and then ask crap, like did you have electricity and running water? Or did we have to manually pump water out of a freaking well? Or forage for berries to eat and cook over an open fire lol? Or my 13-year-old son is like I'm looking to buy a retro gaming console. That console is the NES. Next, it's going to be buying those blow-up armchairs we had in the early 2000s and calling it an Antique Story 11 went grocery shopping, and I thought, hey, they're playing some pretty good music. Reply 1. I went to a bar in San Diego that was playing a lot of music that I enjoyed, but it struck me as odd that nobody was singing along to songs like Blister in the Sun, or all the songs that people normally sing along to at bars. Then I realized that it was a retro bar, trailer park after dark, and that the music was now considered classic rock. Instantly realized I was way older than everyone else and that I don't get out much anymore. Reply 2. You hear those old hits that grew on you. For me, one of them was Then the Morning Comes by Smash Mouth. Hadn't listened to them in at least several years. Went home and downloaded the first 2 albums, Fush You Mang and Astro Lounge. Both are bangin' albums. Story 12 younger dude said his first gaming console was the PlayStation 4. The first computer ran Windows 8 and had no idea what we meant by dial-up or rotary phones. Had to stop and reevaluate my age. Reply 1. Do these PPL not watch movies or TV shows or what? Because I'm too young to have ever used dial-up and rotary phones, but I sure know what they are, lol, literally even. Stranger Things which are so popular have old technology, so how do other teens not know? Reply 2. A few years ago, my daughter called my name from her room, saying she needed me. I was in the middle of cooking something and called back, "Can Dad help you? I'm busy," and she said, "No, it has to be you, you're older." It turns out she was playing some escape room game where she had to enter a number into a rotary phone and she didn't know how. Apparently, the 6-year age difference between my husband and I meant that I was the only one in the house who could possibly remember how to use a rotary phone. Reply 3. I had a similar moment. Me and some of our interns started talking about older video games that we still enjoyed playing. When I began to talk about some of the Sega Genesis games I still loved, they suddenly got very blank looks on their faces, which was when I realized that the Sega Genesis was older than our interns were. I'm old enough to have grown up playing the Sega Genesis throughout elementary school. Reply 4. I used to be a server. One of my tables was a mom who brought her son in on his birthday for some waffles. While waiting, he was on the phone with a family member telling them what he got for his birthday. I stopped in my tracks when I overheard him saying that he got an antique iPod Touch. Told one of my coworkers I needed to leave so I could pick out my urn. Reply 5. I took 2 kids to Harry Potter World in Florida last year and had a great time, but one thing I did not anticipate was just how complex the Ministry of Magic phone booth would be for them. I had to demonstrate how to dial and that you had to hang up the receiver before making the call again, and they were looking at it with the same kind of fascination they had for all the shop windows and the dragon on top of Gringotts. Reply 6. I'm still young, and the first computer I used had Windows 98, and my first console was a Nintendo 64 and a Game Boy Color. I didn't have dial-up or rotary phones, though. Crap, we didn't have internet in the first place. I could technically still go to high school if I was held back a couple years. I've never understood why I know about a lot of the older tech, while the rest of my generation seems to have no idea what any of it is, maybe because I grew up poor so we couldn't afford the newest stuff. Man, now I want to go and buy a Motorola Razr. Those were neat. Story 13. I work at a brewery part-time as a beer tender, aka bartender, for extra income and free beer. I'm 45, and most of them are in their early 20s. I like all of them, but boy, did I realize quickly that I was out of touch with today's slang in the US. We were trying a new beer and my coworker was like, "Damn, this really slaps." And that was followed by "no cap" by another. I stood there so confused about what these guys just said. They have all taught me much more since. Reply 1. When I was 29, I was living with my cousin and her BF, who were both 20. I was cooking dinner one night when they came home and her BF was like, "Damn, it smells gas in here." I looked over at him with concern and asked, "You smell gas?" And he responded, "No, it smells gas." Confused, I asked, "So it smells bad?" They started laughing and were like, "No, gas means good." Reply 2. I was moving recently and selling a few items on the Facebook Marketplace. I already know I am getting older and don't think I'm hip or know about youth culture. But I do watch enough TV and use enough social media that I at least have some passing familiarity with Gen Z slang. But this 20-year-old was interested in buying some items I was selling, and almost all of his messages were basically just these short Gen Z expressions, and I found myself Googling them to try to keep up with the conversation. I mean, a lot are logical variations of current phrases, but definitely felt older. Reply 3. I make a habit of immediately checking the Urban Dictionary every time I hear some new Gen Z Gen Alpha slang. Not only is it good to stay in touch with changing language, but also it's fascinating when you find out that some of today's new slang is actually much older than you think. Reply 4. At my last job, we needed to hire someone for the front desk. I was the supervisor, and begged the owners to hire someone who knew how to at least work a computer. My boss hired an 18-year-old who looked like she was just about to have her 12th birthday. So, basically, an infant. I ended up adoring her. She was smart and feisty, and took no one's crap. My favorite was her and some of the other younger employees' slang. The other manager and I were telling some story about something cute someone did, and the infant and a 20-year-old replied, "Aw, sad." Turns out sad means cute now, and they had to explain that to us. Because they were adorable. Whenever something was cute after that, they would say cute and sad. You know, like they had to translate for us older folks from the motherland. Story 14 years ago, before I retired, when I met a new young troop and realized I'd been in the military longer than they had been alive. Reply 1. I was drinking in the crappy bar near a hotel I often stay in for work, and the cute bartender noted that I hadn't been there in a while. Then I start adding a few things up and realizing that I've been sitting on the same corner of the bar, quietly reading a book, since she was in kindergarten. Reply 2. My father served with a guy who enlisted shortly after 9/11 and had a son shortly after as well. That son grew up and served in Afghanistan right before the withdrawal. Not only did he and his dad fight the same people in the same war, but one of them wasn't even alive for the start of it. Story 15. I'm a female computer geek. I was running cables with this guy at work one night, and he kept trying to keep me out of the actual work part. I finally told him, I've been doing this since before you were born. That was about 25 years ago, and as of right now, I've been working in the computer field for 44 years. Reply 1. About 20 years ago, early into my career, I was complaining to my boss about a system that overheated that I had to unrack, pull the CPUs, swap them out with clean ones, and hope the damn thing booted clean. I was explaining all the steps in detail, and then he was like, yeah, when I was your age, we had a cray damn thing overheated at least twice a month. Had to drain the coolant and resolder all the boards, since they used low temperature solder on them and the chips would just fall off when they got hot. The industry specializes over time, but the earlier you got into it, the less specialized it was. Our young network engineers are dumbfounded when I know what they're talking about because I'm just a software engineer. Story 16. When they absolutely love a new song and then I tell them it's a remake of a song from 25 years ago, they almost always try to tell me I'm wrong until I pull up the evidence, and then it's shocked Pikachu's face. Reply 1. When I play music, my 12-year daughter of course suffers and looks like she's about to die, but then sometimes lifts her head. This is a TikTok! And I can tell that she strongly suspects that they have somehow stolen the song from TikTok and transported it 35 years back in time. Reply 2. When Taylor Swift covered Landslide, I must have had the same conversation a dozen times with our various summer interns. Them, I love Landslide. Taylor Swift is such a great songwriter. Me. Actually, that's a cover of a Stevie Nicks song. Them who? Me, Stevie Nicks. She was with Fleetwood Mac them. There's no way a man wrote that song? Me. Stevie Nicks is a woman. Didn't matter what gender they were. Same conversation every time. The only variation was if they thought the Smashing Pumpkins covered Taylor Swift or not. Story 17. 5 or 6 years back, my team and I went out for lunch around the holidays. Somehow, where were you on 9/11s? Came up, and we're all going around the table sharing stories. I was in my first week of university. I thought a third world war was about to break out, and I was in exactly the right age to have to go fight it. I watched the second plane hit live on television, and by the afternoon, I was making plans to join the Navy. I tell this story, and a lot of the senior people around the table's heads are nodding. Then the new hire chimes in. I was in the second grade. Today, most of those senior people have moved on to other things, and my team has grown to include a number of young people. Sometimes I tell them the tales of 20 years ago when I learned how to use Adobe Photoshop 7.0 that came on a thing called a CD. My graphic designers nod. They've heard those legends before, but they were pre-JK at the time. Then, they show me how to do something in Photoshop the non-dinosaur way, and I nod too. I've heard the legends of these newfangled ways that make my hard jobs easy before. Reply 1. I've got you beat. I used Photoshop 1.0 when it didn't have layers and scaling a shape took at least 30 seconds to process. I remember being so thrilled when they introduced layers. I'm using the limited release Photoshop beta with generative AI tools now. I can't stop thinking about how blown away younger me would have been. Reply 2. We're up to date with our Adobe Creative Suite subscription. I look over at what our graphic designers are doing, and I just shake my head. I started off going to school with the idea of working in print newspapers, and I learned my Photoshop and InDesign accordingly. I never even took a class in Illustrator. I picked up a few things along the way, but basically what these actual graphic artists can do with today's tools, and how fast they can do them, is just mind-blowing.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.